On this episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we're joined once again by Ryan Williams of Starclash fame. We discuss understanding why people love your games, how to nurture an audience from title to title, and we also talk about strategies for relaunches. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Bring your pretty face to my ad.
Amazing.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I'm joined, as always, by Sean. And we have Ryan Williams back on the show, who is, of Starclash fame and also, of course, Crowdfunding Nerds fame. I don't know which one gives you more fame, or if you get any fame from mine.
Hello. Nice to be with you again.
Welcome. So on the episode today, we wanted to really get into two things relevant to your Starclash relaunch. Number one is, when you make a series of games, how do you keep the audience that you earned from the very first one to go back the next one, or to go back the series of games that you make as a publisher? And there's a whole lot of, whole bunch of rabbit holes we could dive down in regard to that. But then also, because you relaunched Starclash and it's successfully funded already, I would love to just kind of dive in a little bit to the concept of, one of our first podcasts we ever did. I think it was like number 7 was, or like over 230 podcasts later, right? Or 220 podcasts later. The concept of the 4.5 possible outcomes to your crowdfunding campaign and how to prepare for each one of them. Because that's kind of what ended up happening here. So anyway, so I think people know a little bit about you, but give us a quick summary for like the most important things, the things that make you you, and give you authority to chat about these things.
Oh, well, I've been project manager here at Crowdfunding Nerds for one, and even back when we were under a different name, Next Level Web, and then we rebranded, and so I've been with the company now for 4 years, and we've overseen over 220 or so tabletop projects and helped advise them. And of course, one of the coolest things about our company is that we're not just doing it at a distance while we market puppy toys and baby food. We're like, in the game, actually marketing what we love, what we play, and what we make, because we have 2 designers that are published via self-publishing and doing the things that we ask people to do, using the same proven methods and, actually experiencing those things on the ground. And sometimes you have successes or failures, or it's a mixed bag. Or in my case, with both of my IPs, with Backwoods and now with Starclash, I had to relaunch both times, and the second time with the relaunches were both successful. Backwoods went about 250% overfunded. Starclash has been live for about 8 days. It has 13 days to go, kind of running a shorter campaign to make it more punchy. I don't really have a bunch of weird like gimmicks or like circus sideshow things to make it fun for 30 days. So I was like, I'm just going to make it, condensed and good. And it's already 150% funded. So I'm happy with the results there. I mean, I think one thing is that publishers, mainly if you're going a Kickstarter route, you set a realistic goal to be in the black, to get the game made, to get products into people's hands. And of course you hope to, it's kind of the shoot for the moon, end up among the stars type of thing if you fall short. But you don't really want to just set yourself up for disappointment thinking you're going to always crush it and have a 6-7 figure campaign or whatever, especially if you're starting from an indie standpoint. When you're just like a first or second time creator, it's like, well, you can be happy that that your game funded, and if it goes beyond that, then it's icing on the cake. So I mean, I think that those are the things that Andrew, of course, nobody's a stranger to what he's accomplished in a very relatively short time. Kind of skyrocketed in, and not only raised a ton of funds. What is it between both projects? About 850K, but also delivered quality and actually fulfilled the game, which is a main talking point in the industry too, right? I mean, a lot of people just ghost out and and you don't end up getting what was promised. So, but yeah, so I guess that's what I'd say on that. But I'm sure you have other things to ask.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. Back to the show. Oh, absolutely. And, I think that one thing that we actually started talking about, Sean and I, before the episode, went live, and then we brought you in asking you some questions to kind of prep us for, what sorts of questions we can ask to get data and that kind of thing. We were kind of pondering, Sean, you had actually, you want to just share, how you had a meeting with a client, and you tell the story, Sean.
Sure. Yeah, we were just discussing in this particular meeting why a certain product line might be struggling, or why it's suddenly fallen off the cliff. And one thing that we kind of came to this idea is that this particular publisher, they had the three very strong independent lines, but the audiences of those three games didn't cross over very well. They're almost their own audience of those games. So it's very difficult in terms of e-commerce to get people to move from one product to the next product and have this kind of bigger e-commerce strategy. So that's something to keep in mind when you're a publisher and you're developing your next games, or you're creating basically a catalog of games. It's very important, I think, as a publisher, to think of my audience, and will they, obviously when you're building a business and your goal is to kind of become this wheelhouse of a publishing business. If you have different goals, you have different goals. But I think it's very important to think in terms of your design and your concepts and your art and your theme, maybe even your mechanics, of appealing to an audience, and then bring that audience to your next project. And I think that's going to make a far healthier e-commerce situation, and maybe long-term growth. So I know, Andrew, that's something that you expressed, and something that you've said you've designed your games with, but less on theme, more to do with mechanics. Is that what you think is holding your audience together?
Yeah, I guess that's really the crux of the question. I guess the thing that I think everybody on this podcast should be most concerned about is, what is the glue that holds your audience together, to the particular game that you've released, or why is your audience banding around the particular game? There are so many reasons that I could point to and say, oh, my audience likes Deliverance because, and one of them is certainly the theme. It's a very unique theme that's probably not on anybody's shelf right now unless you own the game, and that kind of thing. But if I were to make another game, is it required that I use the same exact theme in order to kind of keep the audience, or are there other factors at play that might get them to cross over? So the first thing is, with my base game of Deliverance and expansion of Deliverance, that is literally like carbon copied, awesomeness for the first group, right? The first group is like, of course I'm in. If I liked Deliverance, and if I play the game and I enjoy the game, then of course, and I'm able to afford it, of course I will back the expansion. And I think that's going to be probably the highest converting group, we'll say. And I had about 30, I want to say it was like 35% of the people that backed the first campaign backed the expansion campaign, which, when you think about it in terms of like email list, that is absurdly high. That I would die if my email list converted at 35%, and so that was the previous project, 35%. So that was just a very, very high number. Now, I'll mention, by the way, as a little bit of an aside, I had 2,700 backers roughly in my first campaign. So 35% of that number is about, around like 900 to 1,000. And we had in the new campaign like 3,400 backers. So I earned let's just call it 2,400 more backers because of the other efforts that we did aside from just relaunching. So if I were to simply rely on my audience at its former size, and Kickstarter only, and not rely on an email list or whatever, I would have 1,000 backers to my next campaign. And I actually see very commonly, you've got companies that release games and then they later release an expansion and they haven't been really focused on email marketing and other running ads and things like that for the second campaign. They rely exclusively on their former audience, and then they have 50% as much funding as the first campaign. It's just a much smaller campaign. This is I've kind of decided it's because for in large part because they don't they think that their audience is all going to show up. Like they have an unrealistic expectation of the first backer pool. It's like, oh, like, yeah, I expect 80% of them will show. And that just I don't think is realistic. I've never seen a campaign that of any decent size that has produced a turnout like that for the next campaign, unless some sort of other external factor happens, like a game goes viral and or whatever, and that is really marketing that you're just not paying for. But so I think that that's something that it should be really considered. So anyway, the idea is like, what binds these people together? If I were to make, as a publisher, I'm working on another game. If I were to make a game that brought the greatest number of my audience along, how like what kind of game would that be? And what are the particular things that bind them together? And I think I know for my particular audience, I would say the first thing is a cooperative game is extremely important. If the game is not cooperative, then I will lose a significant chunk of my people. I mean, 90%. And I've polled my audience on this. I've had about 15% of the people that I poll, and I get a very large number. I mean, 500 people or more. Yeah, I had like 750 answer one of my latest polls, but I get a lot of people answering, so it's a very large sample size, and only about 15% of them were interested in competitive stuff. So that's just the way that I built my audience. Deliverance is very cooperative, and so if my next game is not cooperative, I think I would go as far as to call that a hygiene factor of my game. It is necessary. It will really hurt me if it is not cooperative, but just because it is cooperative, it doesn't mean that everyone else is going to come on board. So I think that there's a difference between like things that will actually bring people and then things that are important that people will write you off if you just don't have them. So I guess we could even cut into like two different types of things. One would be hygiene factors, things that don't necessarily help you if you have them, but will absolutely hurt you if you don't have them. And then the second thing are like the true binders, like what will bring people to the next one. And I think that the things that bring people to the next one are some sort of campaign-based gameplay that is very much almost like a video game on a table. People really like that stuff. And I think another thing is playing the good guys. They're looking for games where they play the good guys. I'm not sure if that's like a hygiene factor. Maybe it's more of a hygiene factor. But I'd be curious to see, hear what you guys think about something like that. Like, how would you guys diagnose for the Deliverance game what truly binds the audience together versus like the hygiene factors that would kind of be important to have, but not necessarily mean you're gonna fund well. Like if I want $1 million project, how do I do that, right? What do you think, Ryan?
I think that you're already on the path, perhaps to carving that future for yourself and for the IP, and you're doing that by doing several things that you already know. But to speak on them from my perspective, what I've seen on the outside you doing well is you've fostered a community. That's first and foremost. Like you've created a community that is diverse, that's invested, that actually loves talking about the product and loves bringing other people into it. And I mean, I just saw some post. I don't even remember. I screenshotted it. I don't know if I actually shared it with you. but someone was like saying that their kid was playing Deliverance, and they were playing like one of the prayer cards in the game to like cast down the darkness and help the angelic beings prevail against the demons. And the kid said, and they posted it on your wall on your community. The kid said while playing the prayer card an actual prayer and said, "Lord, thanks for the person who designed this game." It's like, that's crazy. Like, I mean, that there's this level of interest and actually, people being really really excited about something, and even their kids, coming to enjoy it a lot, and everybody wants to get pulled in and experience a phenomenal game. And that the theme actually is so resonant with the fan base, that it generates really big reactions. So that's one thing. I think that's a core thing, is that whoever, it doesn't have to be a Christian product. In your case it is, but whatever a product you're having, if it's about boxing, or if it's about baseball, or if it's about the dry medieval Euro, or whatever it is, you find the things that people latch onto, and then foster discussions, and you build a community, you stay in touch, you share interesting things with them, and you ask for their opinion, those things, and those are things that you're already doing. But as far as like mechanical glue or whatever, you're touching on a lot of that too, cooperative, tactical gameplay in your case, very interesting builds, and player agency, and customization, a really good story driven campaign that's scenario based, adding supplementary content to the audience for free on a quarterly basis, of like even things that are fun, like holiday themed, or kind of zany things that people wouldn't expect coming their way as fun surprises of extra content. So, and then the theme, obviously, I mean, it's just it's a really powerful theme. It's a particular theme, like you said. It really hasn't been covered a lot, surprisingly, since Christians are a huge audience. It's kind of like a huge untapped audience, perhaps, in the board game realm. So yeah, I think you brewed all of that together into a perfect storm. And going forward, I mean, I think that if you just apply the same level of quality and consistency, I think a lot of publishers, sometimes they get too big for their britches, and it's a big problem. They start robbing Peter to pay Paul. They start chain campaigning, and they have a bunch of unfulfilled projects, and now they're buried, and they can't really put their all into the previous things that they were supposed to deliver on already, because they're caught up in 6 other projects, and publishing for other designers, and just all, they got their hands in all sorts of things. And so I think that is actually one of the factors, is consistency, because right now backers are they have a lot of things to be concerned about. I mean, obviously the current climate and those things, which has been spoken on enough, but also companies bailing, like we talked about previously, and not necessarily for the reasons they're saying. They're using a convenient exit point, but mainly for those things I mentioned. They're just they got too far ahead of themselves, got maybe a little too big in their minds, and ahead of their backers as far as actually delivering. And so yeah, you delivered Deliverance, and you're going to do it again. So I think when people see that track record of consistency, of quality, of care, of communication, those are things that really build a lot of trust, and those backers are going to return, and they're going to not only return, but they're going to keep on sharing that project big time with everyone around them.
Yeah, that's some really good points that you brought up there. Some of them seem to be, I actually, I don't know why, I just wasn't really thinking on all the wavelengths that you were, and you mentioned. So I kind of brought up theme and then gameplay and whatnot, but you actually brought up a really interesting third aspect, which is the company. I kind of labeled it this way in my mind, company. And there were 3 giant pillars of, and this, when I think about the types of companies that I follow, one of them that I really love is Chip Theory Games, just for their content and how they support the content, and how they, it seems like they actually care about the things that they're making, and because it just seems like they're gamers, and they're making the things that they want to play. But then really when you look at the types of content, they're making what it is that they want to play kind of well, I guess these games they're developing kind of come to life, and their updates are interesting. Their updates have details that kind of make your mouth water to get the product. You're like, oh, I can't wait till this arrives, and other things. So I think I have like 3 pillars that I wrote down in relation to community or company. One is community support. So, like, if you have a thriving community, then it just is going to make all your products more attractive. If you have one product that people really enjoy, that kind of allows you to foster community, how can you use that same community to by creating a second product? How can you continue to foster support of that existing community? One of the coolest ways I think that I've found in the last, several years is Discord. If you look at Discord, not everybody uses Discord, but of the people that do, it's a pretty active community. It can be rather. And as you develop one game, and by the way, I found out just so that everybody can have relief, your Discord community is very active during your Kickstarter. It can almost just go silent or be dead, after your Kickstarter. And then when your game actually releases, that is when your community can light on fire and just kind of stay lit. You'll find people that are your, like champions that regularly post content, that regularly post just interact and engage. And I would say encouraging those people is super important, and making them want to be there, and then also making involving being involved yourself. So I think the second thing, in addition to community support, would be your personal involvement with your community. I think that excellent companies are personally involved with their communities. And you can look at, Chip Theory Games and Stonemaier Games and all the other, companies that I would consider successful. They all have some level of involvement themselves with their community. I think that the people that back your games know your name, that are involved. And then the third thing I would say is related to communication. I posted an update for Deliverance expansion yesterday, as I do on the last day of every single month. It's like my thing. It was my daughter's birthday yesterday, and I was like, oh, maybe I should, wait and just post, the next day or whatever. And I just decided, I could come up with so many excuses, but I just need to get it done. So I posted, and we had one guy was a super backer that just said, thank you for being so great with communication. It's like a breath of fresh air, and I wish other companies would act like this and whatnot. And I think that surely it stroked my ego a little bit, but I think that people value consistency in communication. If they can rely on your ability to communicate, then they know that that the next project, that by process of deduction, they can rely on your next project you'll be great at communicating as well. And that solves a major barrier to, especially like the super backers for Kickstarter. They're like, I've seen this time and time again, where somebody comes in and is all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but when push comes to shove, are they really going to stick around, or are they going to write one update every 4 months and tell me everything's fine? And it's like many campaigns do. So I don't know what are your thoughts on that, Sean?
In terms of going back to this idea of creating games that can sort of see project to project, carry your audience over, in terms of a designer, you probably have to keep 2 things in mind: is what is it about your current line of products or your line of games that people love, and then what do you actually enjoy designing? Because people might love it, but if you just completely have just like moved past that particular game, I don't know if it's you probably wouldn't be able to continue to keep the levels, the standards, if your sort of drive and interest on there. And you see this with certain companies; they change gears. I think one of the most notable would be like Naughty Dog, which was a video game company, was known for Crash Bandicoot and the Jack series, this kind of stretch and pull, very cartoon-esque type animation style in their video games, and then they switched completely to this very realistic with the Uncharted series, which then led to The Last of Us, and they have continued this very realistic narrative-driven system. So that's something to keep in mind, where the fans might want another stretch and pull animation, but the studio, like, we've been doing this for 20 years or whatever. We want to change gears and try something else. And look, they're still a successful company, right? They still went on and had many successes afterwards. So I don't know, Ryan, you've changed gears because you did Backwards, and that was a very different theme to Starclash. What was your thought process? Obviously, the theme of Starclash is one that you're very passionate about. It's probably very easy to design. Maybe you could uncover for us, what was your decision space in terms of going from Backwards to Starclash, and maybe even highlight, was there any overlap between your audience, and did anyone kind of come over?
Yeah, I think that is a really important topic to think about, because and to consider as designers, because we were kind of discussing earlier in the lobby, so to speak, that you're not only a designer and you're not just doing it for yourself. You're making a game for hopefully a bunch of people to enjoy, and hopefully outside of just the fun of designing, you also take enjoyment in people enjoying what you make. And so when you do that, you need to consider, what do they enjoy? Is it the same as what I enjoy designing? And even as much as people don't, we want to be countercultural and edgy, but it's like, well, you got to also like look at the trends in the industry, and like, what's actually being played, and what mechanisms are hot, and those types of things. And so you're absolutely right though, Sean. Like, it does feel like walking a tightrope sometimes, because you have your passion projects, and your favorite themes and mechanisms personally as like a player of games, and even as a designer. But you have to also balance that out with, like, what do people actually want right now, because it is constantly in flux too. I mean, 6 years ago, roll and write wasn't on the map. And then it had a huge surge, and now people are doing like flip and write, or there's one I just saw on Kickstarter that was just called Think and Write, and they're like, no luck, you don't roll anything, you just gotta, plan out your turn and write it down. And so there's always these, there's Polyomino and Isle of Cats and all this kind of stuff that pushed in for a while. There's always been the bread and butter, medieval Euro theme, point salad type games. You kind of paste your theme on to some core mechanisms, and they continue to have success. So, for me, like with Backwoods, it was just like something that I was passionate about. I've always been into history. Growing up playing, like, well, this dates me, I'm definitely old, but playing Oregon Trail on like my Macintosh and stuff like that, I was like, man, Pioneer Age was so like daring and unique, and I don't really see a lot of games covering it. And I want to make like a cooperative 1830s survival game that's like very grisly, no pun intended, and that is actually has a supernatural element to it too, of like faith and demonic beings possessing creatures that are hunting you down, and you're also enduring the elements, hypothermia and that kind of thing. And so for me, it was the theme that was the starting point there. It was like I really was immersed in this idea of a theme, and I had this vision in my mind of what the game should feel like when you're playing it, and what the environment is, and who the characters are. And then I fleshed everything out from that point. And it resonated. I got like 515 backers, and I sold out of 1,000 copies, and it was cool. And then life took over, and I got married, I switched continents, I became a father, went through a lot of different things, and in the midst of all of that wonderful chaos, I'll say, I kind of just lost touch with my audience, right? Like, what Andrew was talking about and what he has done so well, because he launched a year after I did. Backwoods, he launched his first Deliverance, and then he launched his expansion. 6 months or 10 months or so before Starclash. So we're on similar wavelengths time gap wise, but the difference is Andrew, kept his ear to the ground on his community and was involved and had great ideas about all that stuff. And I was traveling the world, getting married and doing all this stuff. So I just I didn't really it wasn't on the radar for me. I was dealing with a lot of other real life stuff, and if I would have had the opportunity to do it, or if maybe I would have been more mindful to plan, a 15-minute here and there email out to my newsletter, I could have had a lot bigger success because, Sean was talking about crossover. My new game, Starclash, it's live now, and it's like, it's an RTS, very StarCraft like, 90s RTS feel game to it. So it's, strategy and tactical battles and resource management and kind of dudes on the map esque without minis though. I'm kind of using a very chip theory driven model for the components. I was using like purely standees with all these like cubes to track damage and activations. And Andrew was like, "What are you doing that for, man? Like, that's really cumbersome and a lot of components. I wouldn't you just do what chip theory did?" And I was like, "Well, I'm using all the same stats as there." I've actually, to this day, I've never played a chip theory game. But Andrew has, and he, like he said, he was a big fan. And he's like, "You got all the same stats, you've got like all these same things going on, but your component system is not good." So I switched over, but it's a very, very, very different game. Obviously, it's sci-fi, it's not historical fiction, and the mechanisms involved are completely different. One thing I think that helped me with the handful or dozen backers that I did have carry over is that I do have a 1 to 2 player cooperative campaign, scenario book with collection of scenarios forming a story driven campaign. So for people that want a co-op or solo experience, it's there, but the theme's not there. The mechanisms are totally different. So yeah, Sean, I think that is something that people need to be aware of. Is but again, what you mentioned with you said Naughty Dog, right? Like, they made a big pivot, and for me as a designer, like I did have I know that there's an audience for StarCraft, obviously, right? Like there's people who love StarCraft. I'm one of them. Played it for over 20 years, and played it last weekend. But it's like you've got to also know there's an audience, but it also has to be something that you want to do. Like if you're just dragging your feet through a design every day, like is it really going to show up as a good game like at the end product? Probably not. Like you might be able to pull it together, but you're not going to like survive as a company just continuing to like treat it like it's a corporate ladder grind or something. It's like it's games, man. You should be, like Andrew was saying, making the games you want to play, like Chip Theory or something like that. But walking a balance there, and still keeping it real with where the industry's at, where the player base is at, and what players want. And I think that you can find a happy medium there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that there are so many. One I think about in regard of making the games you want to play. Jamie Stegmaier is just because I follow him. He does not like dungeon crawl board games at all. He just is not a fan of several elements of the dungeon crawl experience. But what I think, if I were in his shoes and I'm like, I don't like dungeon crawlers at all, it gives such an interesting opportunity to make a dungeon crawler that you'd want to play. It's like, well, what type of version of this would you like to play? And it gets you really kind of thinking, and it kind of inspires me when I'm like, well, I don't like these elements of games, like for myself and dungeon crawls. There are so many fiddly bits that I hate. It's like, why do you have 95 status effects that boil down to I take damage when I move, I take damage when I stand still, I take damage at the end of my turn, I take damage when I get damaged, I take damage when I don't get damaged. It's like, just eliminate all that stupid stuff. And it's just like, it turns into math, and it's not interesting and engaging. And, and it's like, give me meaningful decisions. If I have some sort of status effect, it's so many fiddly bits. And not only that, but you have to put a token on, and don't forget the token is there, and that and a million other things going on. It just makes a game less fun. So I'm like, I don't like that about dungeon crawls that are out there. They take 45 minutes to an hour to set up, and I hope I did it right. I hope I get the rules right, and I have to make sure that I'm looking through. This particular scenario is 4 pages long, and there are rules hidden that I need to remember while playing the scenario across all 4 pages. So I need to constantly flip back and forth through this book to making sure I'm doing it right. It's like, man, I wish there was a game that I could just have the campaign book stay on the same page the whole time, and the rule book would just be a reference guide that I would not need to reference during the actual mission itself after like 2 games. It'd be so nice, you know? It's like, well, that's one of those are some of the aspects of Deliverance that I could have baked in. But passion is so key. I think that having experience with games, knowing what you like and knowing what you don't like, those types of things really help you. They're kind of like, when you're bowling, if you have the bumper guards up there, you don't ever drop that bowling ball into the gutter because you can't, as long as you know which mechanics you're like, these types of things drive me crazy. You're able to say, no, we're not going down the path of 95 different status effects because I know I hate that. And so you don't go through all of this effort play testing your 90, second status effect. And you're like, I don't know, this might be a little too much. It's just one of those things that saves you quite a lot of time just because of your own taste. So one thing that I wrote down, so actually recently in my life, in real life, I decided to take on the commitment of running a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a first-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I train in my brother-in-law's gym, his academy, and I do all the marketing actually for the academy. One of the things we do as a company, we do SEO marketing for small businesses, getting them to the top of Google and all that. And that's outside of Crowdfunding Nerds in using the Next Level Web brand. And I have marketed for a long time, and I think 3/4 of the people think that I have ownership in that gym or something because I'm around all the time and everybody loves me. Well, it started in my garage, but I don't have any ownership in it or anything. And so because my brother-in-law doesn't want me to feel abused, he never has asked me to teach a class. He'll ask me to teach a move maybe here and there, but that's it. And so Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. was a gap in the schedule, and I train during the early mornings if I can. So we have Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings. I'm like, well, Wednesday is just like a big hole. It feels like in order for the academy to keep growing with the morning class, you would want like morning classes every day so that anybody that can only train during the mornings they have options, right? And so why is this gap? I want to train during that time. And I decided with my wife that I would teach Wednesday so that people can show up, and I talked to her and was like, this commitment, this is kind of why it becomes relevant to, why this background becomes relevant to our conversation. This is a 5-year commitment in my head. Even though I'm just teaching a Wednesday morning class, I need, if I go and tell my brother-in-law, who I can't do anything wrong in front of right now, he'll forgive me for anything. If I start this class and then a month later I'm like, oh, I can't do it anymore. It's like, well, he'll still love me and all that. But it's really a 5-year commitment in my mind. And when I actually talked to him, he was like, I really, really don't want to start this if you're not willing to like stick with it for a long period of time. And he actually even used the phrase, this in my mind is like a 5-year commitment. I'm like, yeah, me too, actually. This is really great. I'm glad that we line up here because, he doesn't, at the end of the day, he doesn't want to like have a bunch of students get really excited about Wednesday morning. And then, I stop and it all of a sudden, all those students are way more sad than but even before the class existed. Right. And so the way that I kind of extrapolate the lesson here and turn it into like running a publishing business or crowdfunding or whatever is that you might not know what the future holds, but as a crowdfunder, as one who makes games, I know I have to commit to this project for a long time in order to really get if I want a business that truly thrives and can run on its own and make amazing things and go great places, then you have to commit for a long time. And there are I think different levels of success for people. I know that some people are not looking for, they're not looking to like fire their boss and start a business and really just take it to the moon and that kind of thing. Some people are, but other people are looking to just have like a hobby on the side, something they're passionate about that they can do, and I think that's totally fine. And so like maybe it's good to decide what is this to you? What is this commitment to you? What is it? If you had to make a 5-year commitment as a result of you crowdfunding something, I would say minimum commitment is like 18 months, because once you deliver your product, you have 6 to 12 months of work to replace parts and handle issues and that kind of thing. I'd say the only issue that I have from my first Deliverance campaign, which was back in, let's see, we delivered about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, was that you can't find it anymore because it's all sold out. I don't have anybody asking for part replacements or anything anymore, and but I'd say the minimum commitment is that you have to make sure you're around to replace parts and other things. And then but what does the real commitment look like? If you're going to be a company that really kind of leads with where this product is made by gamers for gamers, I think that you need to kind of commit as a company to routine communication, regular involvement with the community, and finding ways to support your community. And I think that grows from something really small. It's like something complex that activates really simply, that you can't like overwater. Like if you can actually overwater a plant, right? Like when you're growing a plant, you can give it too much water, and so you need to consistently water it just a little bit, like each day or several times a week or whatever. I don't know how to keep plants alive, so don't listen to me on stuff like that. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I completely agree. I think there's great wisdom in fading fast and growing slow, and I think this is why so many game designers have so many game designs on the shelf of shame, because there's all this enthusiasm in the beginning, and they get into it and it's like, oh, no, I'm the one. I'll chase. It's like a dog chasing their tail, and I think maybe it kind of goes into, well, maybe I shouldn't even begin designing this unless I'm willing to put in the 5 years that are necessary to actually bring this to life, and that might give me cause to step back and be like, well, maybe this isn't. Maybe I don't like the idea that much. I think fading fast is key, because you could be really passionate about something, but if you want it to be a success, the other people also need to have that same opinion. So being able to get something up quickly, a prototype that you can, even if it's thematic, you can shoot out there, see what people think, and then grow with results. I suppose you first create a game that you play yourself. Do you find enjoyable? Then you play with your family. Then you play with your friends. You kind of move the concentric circles just further out, slowly, as you are developing the game. Because that's something that I'd want to do. I often have these kind of spouts of enthusiasm, and I'm the type of person to put my nose to the grindstone when I get a good idea. But I've had so many failed ideas that I've already learned to kind of step back and be a bit slower, and things what I've tried to do. And I find running Facebook ads to be a really great way to very quickly work out whether there's any legs to something. I know that we often would recommend running paid ads, once you've done organic marketing, but you can save a lot of time just by running a short spot of ads, get a general idea of click-through rates, conversion rates. It's like, okay, well, there's actually something here, or actually there's something here, but it's going to take a lot more work to get it to where I want it to be, or maybe just hit gold and like, wow, this has been much easier than I ever imagined getting these results. I'm going to put more work into this. So yeah, fail fast, grow slow. And we've seen big companies do this, like even Valve, another video game company, if I could reference, back in, I think it was like 2007 was a great year for video games, but they released the Orange Box, and this was like a catalog of their games, and one of those games was Portal, and it was almost like the side game, because you had like episode 1 and 2 of Half-Life, I think, and then you had like Team Fortress 2 looked really, and then Portal was this kind of smaller game on the side, and then that was so successful they released Portal 2, which then became, as far as I remember, it's currently the highest rated game of all time on Steam. So again, like it's not like they put all their eggs in Portal. They had all these other properties and IPs, but Portal was just there. The community really attached itself to Portal, and they continued to develop it. So something similar in your game design process, you might find that having a catalog of games and just putting your tentacles out there, and then thinking about expansions and a bigger, going down the path of more games once you understand that there's actually an audience there that shares the same enthusiasm that you once had or you do have for your particular game.
Well, and speaking about failing fast and picking yourself up and looking at the data and learning from it, and then also failing forward, I think is really important too. Is for me, I have a lot of experience with that. I mean, Backwoods, I launched. I noticed that there were just key elements of something with running a Kickstarter that I was missing, because it picked up good steam for the first 2 days, and then it just flatlined, and I gave it a while because I know mid campaign slump is a thing, but I mean it just teetered. I mean, you would get like a couple pledges in a day, and then a couple people canceling, and then a couple of people pledging, and I was just like, yeah, this isn't working. um I gave it its due time and let it sit, and it was just like, yeah. And so then I canceled it after maybe about 8 days or 9 days. And I got in touch with Andrew. At that time I wasn't even working for the company, and we had been in touch anyway, just as game designers, and talking about I think I was teaching him how to use Tabletop Simulator at the time or whatever, and all these other things that we were talking about. And I knew that he had experience with promotion and stuff, so I got some ads running before the relaunch, and I cleaned up the page, and I listened to feedback, and I integrated it, and then I relaunched, and it wasn't even that long. I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks later when I relaunched. But it was just enough of a boost between the first initial exposure that was kind of free advertising. It's not a strategy you want to depend on. It's not even a strategy. Like, relaunching is not something that you want to happen. But if it happens, it's like there are some surprising benefits to it. Like, you got free advertising on Kickstarter, and there was like a group of backers that you had. If you got like 50 or 60% of the way there, those people are likely to come back, especially if you relaunch quickly. I was talking with another designer friend, and he's kind of a serial designer, kind of like Gabe Barrett, but much smaller scale. But he does like all these cute animal themed games, and he just had one that was, again, really successful for the scale that he's at, as like a one-man team, making small box games. And he had a one project early on that failed, and then he tried to relaunch it, but he waited too long. And it was like, well, there was buzz there, and if he would have failed fast, but then like fell forward and picked it up, and maybe just have like some tenacity and push forward, and if you can get it all together in time, then you can execute rightly and relaunch, and you can have success. I mean, I've had that happen twice now, with Backwoods, and now with Starclash being successfully funded. So yeah, I think there's wisdom in that, and it takes humility though too. I mean, the first step of humility is knowing that the project has an issue mid campaign, and reading the writing on the wall, so to speak, and then taking it to heart and being like, okay, and then to have some character there where you don't just give up. You go, okay, there's something I can do, and what is it? And then actually putting in the work to do it, and to have the morale to push through the failure, and to come out the other end, hopefully with a success. And I'm sure there's people that do relaunch, and still don't find success. I don't think we've really had too many clients, period, that didn't fund. We've had a very the vast majority fund, and rarely, if they relaunch, they have an issue. But I think there might have been a few. I don't know if any you guys have any that come to mind, that did relaunch and still didn't fund. I mean, it happens, but I think that I almost admire that more than people who just straight up gave up. But I can understand there might be a place for that too, strategically, for your studio. Like, it's too big of a risk to have like 2 fails consecutively on your list when you go to like projects created, from a backer point of view. That doesn't look good, right? So I guess, what are your guys' thoughts on like relaunching? How much time you need to put into it? What would be like, just from, I know that you guys haven't Andrew's not had to relaunch. He's never had to fail, but we've seen plenty of projects, and we've seen what they've struggled with, and we've seen some of them, kind of rise from the ashes, so to speak. Um, what would you guys say about that, like relaunching on that topic?
Well, I guess my thought in regard to failure is like I have failed a lot. I just haven't failed publicly. And what I mean by that is I failed over and over again in development and playtesting and during my prototyping before my game was even made. There were elements of the game that just were fiddly and unfun and frustrating to players, and they didn't like it. Um, I still remember the very first time I ever got negative feedback for Deliverance was some guy saying that, like, after his turn was over, he's like, "Okay, I just deal what 2 damage." I was like, "Yeah." It's like that sucks. It's like, that really hurts. That he said that. He's obviously not going to join my email list. And I think that there are so many opportunities to fail when you're on this path that you really need to take advantage of that, the ability to fail. Just like I look at, my little children. My 2-year-old is kind of a little bit of a walking nightmare right now. He's 18 months old. He's like always, he'll climb up on top of the table. The moment that I turn away, I remember I made myself lunch one day and I put it in my office right next to my computer. I was going to watch something on YouTube as I've been studying the root RPG and trying to like learn that. And I'm like, I put like 2 sandwiches and then I left to go to the restroom. It's about 30 seconds of time I was gone. And I come back and both sandwiches are destroyed on the floor in my office. It's like, oh my goodness, this little 18-month-old child just jetted right in there and was just tall enough to reach like the top bread and exploded all of the bread everywhere. I'm like, oh my goodness. And he's like too young to give like serious discipline, but I can still tell him no, no, you're not supposed to do that. And he's at this stage now where telling him no makes him cry, and so I lead him out and I try to make him feel better a little bit. I'm like, oh, my sandwiches,
That's funny. Not to interject too much, but I mean, Rachel, my daughter, is the same age.
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't know, maybe it's 20 months old, but it's all the same thing. And it's funny. They're always just tall enough to reach that thing that you thought was out of the grasp,
Yeah.
and they get into things, and yeah, it's just like they're still
So
figuring out what no means, and they're trying to figure out context of all these situations. It's like sometimes I can eat the thing, sometimes I can't eat the thing. Why? It's the same thing,
yeah,
and I'm
it's
hungry.
eating, right? Yeah. So I guess my point is with this that if I did not ever correct my 18-month-old and he became an 18-year-old, I mean, that takes a long time, a lot of time of growth. But if I did not correct that little child, then the adult would be like in jail or doing something terrible for murder or whatever. Like the lack of correction, the lack of consequences, it is a net negative for people in life, and we see this. I mean, it's very, very common for game designers that fail to get their product in front of others that don't like it or that have a negative experience and are willing to say something. If every bit of experience that you've ever received, every bit of feedback you've ever received is positive, then you are not doing your job as a game designer and a publisher. You need to find people that have that dissent from what you want to hear. And that is how you fail privately. So that ideally, your public Kickstarter can be successful because you failed so many times privately. And there are always like, there are limitations. Like, for example, Ryan, you have some pretty significant limitations on your ability to go to, let's say, Origins and Gen Con and Essen, and
Yeah, currently living in China, that's not happening. There's like 0 cons here, and if there were,
Yeah.
like, my Chinese is pretty decent for daily life, not for teaching board games and running conventions. So
yeah, and you have a toddler, and you're still relatively newlywed in a totally new culture with so much input. I'm sure that every day you go out, your brain is constantly working, trying to interpret common things that people are saying to you, which I don't have that problem. Everyone around me speaks English, and I just am native English speaker. So it's not effort for me to hold a conversation with someone. Right. And so I think that these are all factors that make it more difficult for you to, for example, fail quickly, fail often, in game design and publishing. So you have to get your feedback in other ways. And so I think that just for the most part, you've got a lot of people listening to this podcast that don't have as many limitations, that have the opportunity to get out there and fail before you fail when it matters. Like this is kind of the whole point, is that when you go to market, the market will tell you what it thinks of your product, regardless of your, like I was talking to somebody the other day that clearly had rose colored glasses for their project. They were a big believer in their project, and they were being very generic about why it was good. It's like, oh, this is good because everyone should play like this. Everyone should blah, blah, blah. And it's like, when you use the word everyone or anyone, then the word that comes to my mind is no one. Nobody thinks like this. Nobody cares about this. So they just I could tell that by telling them, like, what am I going to tell them? Their product is bad, and I'm just hearing about it for like in 10 minutes. They're so excited about it. It's like, what I tell them instead is like, you guys, you need to test this product in front of other people that you are not in that room. Like, I want you to somehow get be a wallflower. Don't answer any rules questions. Just see how players interact with this thing that you made on their own, without your help, without you leading the game, like without you being the player that leads. And so I just think that people that think their game is so awesome that haven't tested it, that's oftentimes that's a very common, a Kickstarter's got I want to say like a 40% failure rate or so in the board game space. And I would say the vast majority of those are preventable, because the product should never have been launched because there were problems, right? And oftentimes backers can suss that out. Now, in Ryan's case, I actually thought product is ready. Then, in your case, Starclash. I love Starclash. I played it and really loved it. I can't wait to have it, selfishly, but because it's a really fun game. But I find that there are other reasons that a project may fail, because maybe expectations weren't in line, like a backer's expectations, maybe about the pricing or about all sorts of different elements might not be in line. But
or your page is half done when you launch because you had like a giant family emergency, and you had to launch anyway because you already postponed once, and then it's like, oh, I don't even have my trailer up, I don't have like my review quotes up, I don't have like tons of like huge sections that I should even have, like how to play gifts or basic things.
So like what, bringing it there, I guess the question is, what do you feel like attributed to your failure of Starclash the first go? What would you have done differently? So ideally you didn't fit, like, what would you tell yourself now? The you of now, what would you tell yourself then? And what did you end up doing differently in the second go that caused you to overfund already?
Yeah, I think especially when you're a small team, or in my case, I'm a one-man team doing everything. Um, there's going to definitely be blind spots, even if you're a 3 or 4-man team. And so blind spots, it's like, well, you're not going to know that you have them because that's why you're blind to them. But you need to have good people in your corner that, like you mentioned, those dissenters and those people courageous enough to say something that they know you probably won't like, but they genuinely are interested, perhaps, but they want to make sure that it's something that actually happens because the offer needs to change, or some dynamic with maybe it's in the testing phase of the product, some mechanism needs to change, or some imbalance needs to change. So you've got to you got to be receptive. And I've always been receptive. That wasn't really an issue. I've always integrated a ton of things. I mean, like Andrew said, for a long time, he said, this phase and that phase need to be concurrent and just simultaneous, and everyone just collects their resources at the same time, or something like that. And I was like, no, no, no. And I mean, I was listening, but it took me time to realize that it had wisdom, because you just have to play enough, and you have to keep playing and go, okay, I'm starting to hear this from more than one person, and it would help with like some other facet that I'm concerned about, like play duration or whatever it is, or complexity of rules. And then I go and revisit feedback. I've never thrown it out. It's just gathering there. And so, to be receptive, to have and to pull people and actually ask them to help you find your blind spots. Because again, you don't know they're there. You don't know what you don't know. So and then when they tell you, you have to have a plan, and you have to take action on that plan. Because if you don't do anything about it, then that's no good either. Or if you're too proud and you just throw out the feedback, obviously that's not going to have any effect. So those are things. So emergencies will happen. Life happens. We talked about that in other podcasts that I came on to. But some of the things outside of that, it's like, well, what could I have done then? Because now I know that emergencies do happen. I haven't had a lot of family have health emergencies. I mean, my mom's young, my dad's young. They had me when they were 20, kind of thing. I haven't really, encountered that. But my wife's mother is older, and she's gotten to an age where she did have a health emergency, and that was just never really in my panorama. And so now it's like I understand that things can change quick. Like, so I have given myself more time? Was there time where I was taking it a little too easy, enjoying my hobbies or whatever? That's important, work-life balance. But, could I have given myself a little bit extra cushion so that if something did happen like that, even unexpected, I'm expecting the unexpected, and I already had, maybe I couldn't have had everything on the page given the circumstances, but I could have had like 80% there instead of 50% there, and then shored up the other percentage within that first 2 days or whatever, and wrote it out. Maybe that would have happened. So I think that there's always something that you can find to improve on. And yeah, what actually made the difference for me was just, I knew what needed to be done. I knew what was missing. It was just a matter of like uploading it on the page, and then also, taking some feedback. And Andrew mentioned, maybe it's the offer, maybe shipping, or maybe like you can find a way with quotes or whatever to see if you can get it to be a little bit cheaper. And then recently, sometimes it's feedback or people interjecting that you had no idea or even looking at your project. Like I had this one guy, I've never heard of him. I guess I'll give him a plug. I don't even remember his channel name correctly, but it was like Bowers Gaming Corner, like BOWER.
Yeah.
Cool dude. He's got like 30K subscribers, not huge, not small. And he just goes and tears through Kickstarters, and it kind of like Legion of Games or some of these other guys. And he did a complete episode just on Starclash, and he went through it all. And he, because I'm looking at making my game in Vietnam if tariffs don't settle down. He had a funny title. He titled the thumbnail "Got My Game in Nam," and whatever. So he was going through it, and one of the things that he said was just the presentation order of the contents of the box. He's like, what's going on here? I'm seeing like a game component and then a t-shirt and then more game components and then an art book and then more game components. He's like, I'm just trying to like figure out what's even here, because it's like it's in disarray. And then you hit me with like a list at the end of just like 100 tokens, 30 cards, 8 player boards, but I didn't get to see any visuals for those. You just threw a list at me at the end, and I was like, oh man, this guy's like on point. This is very important. I went through and restructured all that stuff, and I started, and that was mid campaign, because I just didn't know, that I had bounced it off of quite a few people, the campaign page, and they're like, oh yeah, it looks good. But there's always someone who has a different eye, especially as someone who's like a serial backer. Even as other project creators might give me advice, it's like they're not necessarily seeing it from the eyes of someone who's in and out, like always day in and day out critiquing projects and looking through for with a fine tooth comb, like Bauer is. And so I was like, man, I'm already a few days into my campaign. I'm going to get on that right now. And I started to see pledges climb a lot more once I shored that up and was like, okay, we got to make sure that the graphical, textual order, everything, the presentation of what's in the box and what the pledges are and how those are structured are understood clearly. Because it can look good, it can be a great game. The graphical, pizzazz can be there, but if people aren't able with what scientists say are goldfish-like attention spans nowadays as humans on that like short form scroll formula, if they're not able to just quickly surmise like what's up from down and what they want, and if it's something that they do want, and how to get it in their mind, like, okay, this is affordable, this is appetizing, this is clearly presented, I like what is there, I'm getting it. And if they're just like, this is too much effort to even read, or if the font's too small, they didn't design this for mobile, they were on desktop with their big 30-inch, wraparound monitors, and they weren't thinking about like the legibility or the font sizes or the contrast between the background color and the text color. I mean, there's just so many elements that you could miss and have a fail. And so, stuff like that. I'm glad, I came across that dude's video. I think I Googled myself pretty much and was like, wonder what other people are saying, if there's any just like fringe content out there. Cause and I was like, oh, what's this? So yeah, I've talked long enough on it, but I'd say that those are some things that helped.
That's awesome. And what, just I guess to ask the question, and I think I know the answer, well, I know what I would answer, but would you have delayed your project again before launching it the first time? Or would you have let it go? Without the knowledge that that it didn't end up funding, would you change anything now? Or would you
it's really
did you
hard.
value that experience? Yeah.
It's hard with delays. I think that I had already pushed it back a couple times because I knew things just weren't coming together, and then it wasn't for like an emergency thing that was like and when the emergency thing came up, it was like you only have, it's like you have lives in Mario or whatever, and you hit the spiked turtle shell and you fell in the hole or whatever, and it's like you're on your last life. It's like, well, you know that you're not like on those you're not on a level anymore that you hit a secret block and a mushroom comes out, or a one up like the green mushroom comes out or whatever, and you get another one. It's just like there is a limit to how far you can stretch your community, and delays come up and certain things come up and people understand for a while, but after a while it's like you just keep delaying and you just like, okay, I'm definitely launching on this day, and then you delay. Don't worry guys, okay, last time I was kidding, but this time definitely. And then you're like, oh, I'm delaying again. It's like you can't just keep doing that. I had like 750, 800 followers at that point. And it's like, well, I'm just going to lose them. I knew that I was going to have issues, but I just put everything together. I stayed up all night, and I thought maybe I can somehow do it. And it wasn't realistic with that first launch. And I just tried my best though, given the circumstances. And it was gut wrenching because you can see it's like the train wreck in slow motion, but you're in the midst of it, and you're just like, it's like you're in a tailspin, and you're the pilot of a fighter craft, and you're just trying to pull up. It's like you don't have time necessarily, to just hit the eject button, because maybe there's that chance that you do pull out and you save that like multi-million-dollar fighter jet. And so yeah, I don't think I would have delayed again, just out of respect to the people that were following me. And I think that there's just a limit like to that you can just like keep delaying and stringing people along. It starts to hurt your reputation. And so people it also depends on the circumstance, right? Like, were you just slacking off and then you didn't have a good reason for like why your page was half baked, or what? Like, for me, it was like, wow, this is legitimate. Like, she had like emergency chemo intervention on a crazy aggressive tumor. My mother-in-law. So everybody understood that. I think everybody's had family that's had dire health circumstances arise, and everyone was really supportive, and they were just like, dude, relaunch. I will back this again. Like, and I pulled my backers. Over half of them responded, about 60% responded. 100% of them said they would back it again. So, and that was after the big StarCraft IP announcement too, that we did an episode on about like standing tall with giants or whatever. And I asked them that too. I was just like, well, I got to know, because it was also one of the reasons that I felt like maybe I should cancel, because it's discouraging. It's like your game is based on being a StarCraft like RTS experience, and you haven't seen any game like that for like 20 years, and it's a Grail game that people talk about in forums all the time, but no one can get a copy. And I was like, I'm going to make that game. And then it's like, oh, StarCraft's coming back. Like in the middle of your campaign, it gets announced. It was like, oh, gut punch, right to the solar plexus. And so I told him, I was like, does that announcement really like affect you? Like, and I gave him some options. Like, no, I back games based on their individual merit and quality and presentation and theme. Yes, I would rather just own like a genuine like StarCraft product. Or maybe it depends on what else I see the updates from Archon are on StarCraft or whatever. And the majority were no, and then like some of them were, and like maybe the other quarter were maybe, and only like a fraction were yeah, it really affects me. So I was like, okay, I'm getting really good like data here based on being open enough to pull my backers, and so yeah, I relaunched based on that. With some knowledge, that I would get some people back. I mean, they said they would at least, and they did. I have had you guys asked me about Backwoods, like how much of a carryover there was from Backwoods. It was like 5-year gap, totally different theme, totally different mechanisms. Yeah, not a lot of return backers from that project, but I had a ton of return backers from the canceled first Starclash campaign. Come back for this Starclash. So that they pretty much the number I pulled, they like all of them showed up. I think I've had like 36 or 40 from the initial like 60 that I had in the original campaign. And you have to remember, like a good chunk of those were just the $1 pledgers, that were never really invested anyway. So I didn't expect them to show up. So yeah, I mean, not a lot of numbers to go off of. I mean, it's still a small project. It's reached 10K in about 8 days. But it's got like a small passionate backer base. Like 10K raised between 77 people, but about 15 of those are $1 pledges. So they're really invested. Like the people who backed are backing hard and adding all the add-ons and the expansion. And it's like, getting if you factor out the $1 pledges, it's like about $160, per pledge. So that's been one difference too, is the offer is maybe more exclusionary, although I do have pledge over time enabled, thanks to Kickstarter being awesome, because they're running a beta on that and they're going to bring it to the forefront. So creators, if you didn't know that, they are doing the whole stretch pay thing on Kickstarter. It's going to come live for everyone eventually. So that helped. But when I get a backer now, it's like I really only need to pick up like 3 or 4 pledges to have good momentum, money wise in a day, because they're big jumps. Whereas with Backwoods, the average pledge was $40. So I needed 4 times as many backers to get the same result. And Andrew, I know that you saw a really good effect with your average pledges on Deliverance, right? I mean, it was like well north of
$148 average pledge.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I guess we've been going for quite a while. I don't know how long you guys want to go.
Yeah, well, Ryan, maybe you could tell folks where they can find more information about Starclash and how they can back the project.
Yeah, if you Google Starclash Kickstarter, then you will find the link pop up. I guess actually I would say Starclash RTS Kickstarter is what you should put in there, because you might get the old project link and go like, oh, I guess this is canceled, but it's not. But those links are still like in the SEO rankings. So yeah, and then you could also probably check the link in the podcast description. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, very good. I'm encouraged. It's always nice for us as a company. You and I have both published several products, and actually, funny thing, Sean, you published something on the Game Crafter a long time ago, way back in the day. What does that bring us to 5 things that we've personally published in our little team? I like it because it gives us a little bit of a perspective of what our clients are going through. And I think that's one of the things that really makes us unique as a marketing agency, is that it's not just a marketing project to us, but it's something that we see ourselves in when we are giving counsel and we're running ads and everything like that. So it's super super important to me that we take care of every one of our clients. So, but yeah, I'm really happy to see you funded, and it makes, I guess, 5 successfully produced things. If you and I deliver on our promises here with these latest, and it's I'm excited. So, well, on that note, let's have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.